Good afternoon. My name is Chip Taylor, and I'm coming to you from Zalisi, Ukraine. We've got a small organic farm here where we grow mostly ingredients for Mexican food, peppers, tomatoes, that kind of stuff, a few herbs. And we use the proceeds that we get from that in order to fund a free alcohol and drug treatment center. We've got a 10-bed unit, but right now we're just running it as an outpatient, which means you come to see us for an hour or so during the day and you go home, you sleep at night, you work at home, or you work and that kind of stuff. Most of them our patients are coming once a week. And so, anyway, I'm trying to explain how people, especially in this part of the world, can use a small piece of land in order to generate an income, make a living. And so there's several things that I've talked about so far: how to turn land in from conventional farming into organic. We've got about half an acre of food plots. It's really one's planted in barley, one's planted in wheat. Half of the one that's in wheat has also got green Oaxacan corn growing on it that we'll use for tortillas and that kind of stuff a little bit later in the fall. What I want to talk to you today about is material handling. That's a polite way of putting it. Yesterday, I mentioned that I take a lot of experience from fields unrelated to what we're doing here and apply it to this situation. And one of them is material. Um, I was taught by my father the steel business and how you take material in one end of the building and it goes out the other end and it doesn't go back and forth. It just all flows in one direction. And it's what we try to do here. There's a couple of exceptions to it, but that's pretty much the principle. Starting with animal feed and corn and barley, that kind of stuff that either we grow or we buy locally. Tomatoes, anything that we have to handle, we bring it in. We bring it in one spot and we kind of run it through the organization. And that includes poopy. And I wanted to talk specifically about how to handle animal waste. And, I've done composting for years in a lot of different ways, in different situations where it was more or less convenient than what we have here. And so when I first got here, there was a section fenced in or had walls around it right here next to the goat house. And it was about 20 foot wide by 30 foot long and about 5 foot deep. And it was just poop. But it was never turned like you have to do with composting. It was not covered, so it was always wet. The surface might, com- the surface was kind of composted. But once you get in 6 inches, there's no oxygen, and therefore it doesn't have the ability to turn into compost. And so, as soon as I cleared that out, and that was the first, certainly within the first year, but we got rid of or we just distributed a bunch of the poopy all over the food plots here that first fall and early spring. And because it was just sitting, it wasn't decomposing, it wasn't doing nothing, it was just sitting. And so I've looked at all these areas of this farm that we're on. Right here is it's almost 3 acres right here where we sit. Not all of it obviously is farmable. There's a church, there's a couple of buildings, there's a lawn, there's all kinds of stuff that we can't use. But I have tried to find a spot to handle the animal waste without having to move it more than once. And that's all I want to do. I just want to move it once. And in normal composting, you take a small 4x4 or small section, and you mix it with straw or grass or long clippings or whatever you're going to mix it with, leaves. We use a lot of leaves. And you turn it so that it gets oxygen all the way through. You keep it wet so it decomposes. And but it's a process, and you have to spend some energy doing that. It helps if you got equipment. It helps if you got a front end loader that you can turn stuff over with. We don't have that. We got shovels and we got pitchforks. And so what I do in this theory of um, material handling, I've got a horse stall. You can kind of see it, but the one with the window on the end of it, not my house, not the main building. It's right over there. Anyway, got the horse in there, and the horse is just a big rabbit, and we really don't use him for anything. My son rides him. We use him with some of the neighbor children to ride them. There's a child nearby with cerebral palsy. He's ridden it. During this pandemic, we hadn't done a lot of having other children from other places come in, just in being overly cautious. But the horse produces his manure, a considerable amount, and we take that manure, we clean the stall out, and we take it directly to the chickens. It contains a lot of feed, it contains a lot of plant matter, and we scatter it here with the chickens. And then often, not every day, but often when the horse is in the pasture, I'll go out there with either a bucket or the wheelbarrow and I'll collect what he's produced that day. There's a few cows in that pasture, I'll collect that. And again, I bring it straight here to the chickens. The chickens work through it. If it sits for a couple of days somewhere, it increases the amount of insect life inside the manure. 3 days is optimum, according to Richard Perkins up in Sweden. He's got a nice regenerative agriculture operation going up there, and I got this idea from him. Anyway, we run it into the chicken coop and let them work on it for weeks or months. And then once or twice a year, we go in there and till up all of that ground where they're walking around now. Turn it over, let it sit for a few more days, and then we take that directly to the greenhouses or the raised beds, and we've moved it that one time. Now, the chicken manure that's in the coop itself, I'll take that directly to the greenhouses. And I don't put it on young plants. What I do is I dig a trench, bury it in there, let it sit for 3 or 4 months. I'll probably do that in the fall, or certainly as soon as I start to pull plants out. And I'll let it sit in these trenches, cover it up, and keep it wet, and it'll decompose. And number one, but number two, it feeds the microbial life that's in the soil, which is what feeds the plants. It breaks down the manure into usable um, nutrients that the plants can uptake. We mix it with ashes from the furnaces, which gives it phosphorus and potassium, and then we mix in also some eggshells. I don't do that a lot, but we do collect eggshells, crush them up, and mix that in with this fertilizer when we lay it down in these trenches. But the point is, I handle that poopy that one time. I move it from the horse to the chickens, and then I move it from the chickens to the greenhouse. So that's 2 times. But the chickens is only the one time though. Now I've got some other animals here. I've got some goats. We've got five that we'll keep. We've got 6 total, but one of them we're gonna give away. And we clean that place out a couple of times a year. We add a lot of straw in it during the year, but we'll clean it down to the floor and bring all that stuff out, give it to the chickens, because again, it's got a lot of feed in it, it's got a lot of plant matter, and so that's going in them for them to process. Basically, I use them not to compost, but to break everything down one more stage, because they're picking through it constantly. And there's a lot of insect life form, so they're picking up protein by doing that. They get out most of the grain that's still whole that might germinate in my um, greenhouse or in my food, in my raised beds. And so they get rid of that stuff. Instead of the composting killing it off, the chickens actually eat it. Then I've got 3 pigs. I've got one big brood sow. She's probably pushing 400 pounds. And then I've got 2 smaller, they're not Vietnamese potbellies. I think they're Korean potbellies, something like that. But they're just pets. And so we're not planning on eating them. We might, but we're not planning on it. And so they handle a lot of weeds and that kind of stuff. Now their manure will have seeds in it, and I don't bring that manure to the chickens. That goes directly to either the raised bed that's right in front of the pig house, or it goes into the trenches in the greenhouse and decomposes over a few months' time over the fall, winter, and spring. And so I only deal with their stuff the one time. It makes it simpler for us, saves time, saves energy. It still serves the purpose of adding organic fertilizer to the soil. It still provides the nutrients that the microbial, bacterial matter needs in the soil. It's able to process for long enough to get rid of any kind of pathogens that might be of harm to other plants or to people or any of that stuff. So we get rid of all the possibility of negative effects from handling the manure, and it provides us with a time efficient method of dealing with the manure. I know that in Mexico and California, I don't know about it in Arizona. I'm sure it occurred there, but where um, fecal matter from the livestock, for whatever method they were using, mixed in with irrigation and was applied to lettuce, greens, and that allowed for salmonella and a couple of other negative pathogens that affect the human population. It allowed that kind of stuff to get into the food chain, into the grocery stores, into the restaurants.